Phone 531-8331.
BCTV. A best show.
Good morning. My old mother used to tell me, when she knew I was going to be on television, always be positive in the morning. Give people something warm and comfortable to start the day off with a smile. Well, the only smile I can find this morning is that the totally discredited federal Liberal government is just so anxious to commit hara-kiri that even the Tories under Joe Clark will waltz away with the next election. Not that I am in any way a chauvinist, not that I in any way would deny the total liberation of all segments of society, but to see this woman, Arola, she's the one that had her hair dyed recently, I think, Judy Arola, used to be Minister of Mines, and now the Minister responsible for the status of women, advocate the removal of the tax exemptions for decently married couples is just bleeding ludicrous. There are about a couple of million married couples in this country, and she thinks that that's unfair. She doesn't think that non-working wives looking after 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 10 kids should have the benefit of a little extra because they are married. And I'll guarantee that Lalonde backtracks on that in due course, because the new Lalonde is no longer the tough authoritarian guy. He wants to please businessmen, and he wants to please, I'm sure, that 2 million married couples in this country who have had very fairly an additional tax-exempt status for some time. And then, I haven't got all the details yet. Whistler, you know Whistler, touted as the greatest place in God's earth. Prices at Whistler went zoom in the boom. Now it's gone down in the recession. There obviously was a danger that the municipality of Whistler was going to go belly up, bankrupt. What is social credit to? For all the enterprises up there, it steps in. It's got a new crown agency of some kind, which will probably crawl on its knees to or go to the government and say, please guarantee loans to bail everything out. Well, if they do it for Whistler, they've got to do it for certain other places which could be in similar trouble. Well, still on a happy note, at least on a positive note, what about interferon? Has British Columbia made, with the best intentions in the world, a bad investment in pledging all these shares to the Terry Fox Fund, some of which are pledged again, I believe, specifically for interferon? Because the word is that interferon might not be the panacea it was hoped to be, and might be overtaken in these days of incredible developments by cheaper and better substitutes, achieving perhaps the same cause for cancer and the common cold. Well, I've got Pat McGeer here this morning, just back from Japan. He's not a techno-peasant. We are the techno-peasants who are liable to be put out of jobs. We're going to find out what Pat McGeer knows about the interferon crisis, I'll call it, and what's new in, of all places, Japan. And for added relief and colour this morning, you'll remember when I had Paul H. Robinson, the US ambassador to Canada, on. And I challenged him with a report from a guy in Toronto that Johnston had picked up Pearson and shaken him more or less like a beagle. Let's refresh our memories on what happened between me and the ambassador first of all. You do me a favour, Ambassador.
Yeah.
I want you to check a story for me.
Yes?
He tells a hysterically funny story now.
It's the Pearson one.
This is the Pearson and Johnston, where he says that Charles Ritchie watched Johnston lose his temper and pick Pearson up by the shoulders, just like a beagle.
I don't know, but I'm going to find out. It's Edgar Ritchie.
Oh, it's not Charles.
Edgar, I believe it's Edgar. I know Edgar, so I'm going to check with him. I'll check it. I'll let you know.
Would you? I'd really like to know.
I can't imagine, even though Johnston wasn't anything smooth, I think it would be a terrible rudeness to have done that, and I question it.
Now, I've got the answer in a television interview with the author of the book, Lawrence Martin, of Presidents and Prime Ministers, and that will be included as a little bonus on this Friday morning program. But first, the great McGeer, after the break. While I was away, Dr. McGeer, a story came out that, even with the best will in the world, that your leadership in the investment in interferon involving the Terry Fox Medical Research Foundation, the British Columbia government, and BRIC shares may have been overtaken by events. And I want to ask you quite bluntly if you're at the stage now whereby the complicated plans to raise money for a plant to construct interferon here are now off.
No. There will not be sufficient demand for interferon to justify a plant until a product license is obtained. In other words, until individual physicians can prescribe it themselves for people who have cancer or various viral diseases. There is an outside chance that a plant might be justified for experimental production only if demand were to turn up in China, or if we were to share production in countries as in the Caribbean. But I consider that unlikely, and I think a plant will not be built until a product license is on the way.
In other words, until interferon is provable as useful, to say the least, in a mass use round the world.
That's correct.
Now, did I not see in the famous Padmore article that there are people involved in the same experimentation are saying that it appears that interferon produced from the original gene is about to be overtaken with much cheaper production, done much more efficiently because of new genetic research?
Well, I think genetic research, in theory, will produce interferon which will be cheaper to obtain than through tissue culture. But there's a long, long way down the road before that will be established. The culture from human cells, which is the process that we will be using, produces a whole variety of interferons. In other words, it produces the full family that comes from the human cell, whereas genetic engineering will just select one member of the family and will clone that. And whether selecting one member of the family will do the same as having the whole family at work at once is the question that the genetic engineering people have to answer.
So therefore calling it you, it's not really you, but you are, the interferon plans are still going straight ahead in British Columbia, is that correct?
You bet.
You're not discouraged by these other genetic singular developments?
Not a bit. In fact, the events of the last year to 18 months have really made us feel much more comfortable about the judgments we made, because whenever new technology is involved, you recognize that there's a risk. When I discussed this with my cabinet colleagues, I said, look, this is a high-risk venture, but I couldn't think at the time, nor can I think now, of a better way to invest research funds than in a product of the human body, which we make ourselves, as a possible new treatment for a scourge like cancer and for the many viral illnesses for which there's no treatment at all. So people who get these incurable diseases come along and say, isn't there something you can do to help us? And they go to these crazy cancer clinics in Houston. They go in for mysticism, anything to try and give them a little comfort when they know that the disease is going to take their life. And when you have an opportunity to develop a product made by the human body in defense of viruses, in defense of malignancy, then of course you think this is the sort of thing we should back. So that's why you take the risk.
I can't argue against the risk, but I'm just wondering if you've been outsmarted, and if too the public is entitled to ask some searching questions about the committal of 4.6 million shares, which at that time were worth $25 million, from the much attacked Gracht. Now, if you ever get to the investment stage and you raise money from private investors, and then the whole thing collapses, the investors are covered by the collateral of 1 million of these 4 million shares, right?
That's right. It's all a question of risk and reward. And one of the things that Canadians I've just come back from Japan. There are at least 6 pharmaceutical companies scrambling in the interferon field over there, undertaking clinical trials with interferon developed from various sources. One of the companies, and I believe it's the company that is best placed in Japan, is the one that has made an arrangement with the Wellcome Foundation, just as we have. Another company has made an arrangement with the only other major competitor today, which is Hoffman-La Roche, using the Genentech engineered interferon.
If a more positive treatment comes up, does British Columbia get its, is it allowed to produce whatever is discovered elsewhere in the world under this Wellcome system here in BC?
Well,
is it allowed to?
If there were something clearly better, then we would try and make an arrangement for that. There's one company that I want very seriously to enter discussions with in Japan that is making a form of interferon that everybody has wanted, called the gamma interferon. This is the one that's made from the thymus gland, and it's thought it may be a strong adjuvant to the so-called alpha family, which is made from the lymphoblastoid production method of
But what you're telling me is therefore that here is one method of producing interferon, and if you can get the rights to produce another method, you might go for that too.
Well, it's a different family of interferons.
No, but I'm saying this plant that you're conceivably going to build sometime down the road would handle the other methods of producing interferon.
You bet.
If you can get another license.
That's correct.
How much did you have to pay Wellcome for the license for this?
I can't remember the exact details of the arrangement. There's a new agreement has been signed with Wellcome just in the last couple of weeks. So I can only give you the general outlines because I don't know the absolute details. We paid Wellcome a technological fee for the long-term rights, and I believe that was £1 million. Then we have contracted to undertake a certain number of trials with interferon to try and establish its product viability for the Canadian market. And we have agreed that we will pay a royalty if and when we produce the interferon, so that there are the 3 parts to it.
Okay, let me put it quite clearly to you now then. Interferon is not a cancer or a common cold cure yet, is it?
That's very questionable. In my view, it will turn out to do both those things. Now, you wouldn't use it for the common cold unless it were very, very cheap to produce. Mm-hmm. As far as cancer is concerned, around the world, in a broad variety of trials, it's proving to be effective in 15 to 25% of cases. Now, the really mysterious thing to everyone is why is it not working in the remainder? In Japan, there is a group treating people with brain tumors with interferon. And as you know, brain tumors are almost universally fatal. So that when you get something that is curing or preventing the growth of brain tumors, then it's something extremely exciting indeed. Now, they get their results only when they inject directly into the tumor. And they're saying this: we do not know how interferon is inactivated by the body, but it's our suspicion that when we get a high dose level right into the cancer site, then it becomes very effective. We think those that do not respond are people that for some reason are rapidly inactivating the interferon so that it can't do its work. One of the great tests at the present time is to discover how the body disposes of interferon, which is administered by intramuscular, intravenous,
Will we be
directly
doing this kind of research here, if and when we produce a plant?
I am extremely disappointed in the level of interferon research that is going on in Canada. It is very tiny by comparison with what's going on in Japan, the United States, the United Kingdom. The only really aggressive program that's going on in Canada today is the one right here in British Columbia under Dr. Boyes and Dr. Silver.
Okay, is there a possibility that interferon itself, the whole interferon market, might go bust and you would accept with aplomb the loss of all the investment?
I don't think that's a possibility. Now, others might say that it would be, but there is just too much positive evidence coming from too many quarters. I think it's a certainty that interferon will be a valuable product in treating human disease. And I say it for this reason. Interferon is a natural product of the human body, and there has never yet been an important human product, isolated, purified, and administered exogenously that hasn't been useful in the treatment of human disease.
Well, with Dr. Pat McGeer, Minister of Science, Technology, Communications and Universities, or something like that, after the break. Just one more word on interferon. You're telling me right now, speaking as a researcher yourself with some considerable knowledge, that interferon cannot finish up being a useless product.
No way.
You're quite sure of that?
Yeah, I would feel thoroughly confident of it.
And
but
it can't be overtaken by any other magic developments? Not that one would love to see it overtaken by some magic cure.
Well, one always hopes that new methods of dealing with cancer will be discovered, but interferon is apparently the body's defense mechanism for viruses and cells that run out of control. And therefore, at the moment, it's the best hope for treating intractable viral illnesses and a very strong hope for treating certain forms of cancer.
Mm-hmm. I thought it was a bit odd, mind you, that Canada, I'm talking about the Research Foundation with the government's assistance, now has the, what do you call it, the franchise.
Yes.
To retail interferon, if and when you build your own plant.
Yes.
In Canada, the Caribbean, and China. Is that correct?
Canada and China, and we want to get in on some of the Caribbean market too.
So that's your big hook if it ever came to you could sell it to the whole Chinese market.
That's what we hope.
Okay, Dr. McGeer, you're just back from Japan.
Correct.
With a stopover in Hawaii, I see by your tan. Is that not correct?
I was there at the same time you were, Joe.
I have not
Jack,
been in Japan this year.
No, in Hawaii. I vacationed as you vacationed.
We did not meet or speak in any way, shape, or form.
We enjoyed the rain together.
No, we didn't. We were at different ends of the island. Now, what about all this satellite battle that you're gaily engaging in? Here you are, a minister of a junior government, cocking a snoot at the man of considerable prestige and power, Francis Fox, and you're dishing out licenses like there was no tomorrow. You must just be waiting for a great court battle which you will lose. I'm talking about satellite receivers.
There certainly will be a court battle, but what will happen in the future is not going to depend on what a learned judge decides. It's going to depend on what scientific developments can be made available to the average citizen. Now, interestingly enough, when we were in Japan, we had discussions with the officials of Fujitsu who now have got in the prototype stage, soon to be made available to the public, satellite receivers in the price range that I've been predicting on your show for some time, namely cheaper than a television set, able to receive multi-channels at a single time, working in the 6.4 gigahertz, which is the American satellite, or the 1412, which is our satellite frequencies, so that it means that people all around the world, including Canada, will be able to buy at a cheap price workable home television receivers for satellite communication.
$500 bucks?
Yeah.
$500?
Yeah.
How big? Maybe what? Give me a price.
Well, yeah, about 500. We tried to pin them down on the price, and I said, when it comes out, I want to buy your first one. I'll put one up on the legislative lawn. I'll put one up in my backyard, because they're going to be available in mass markets around the world, and wouldn't you know it would be the Japanese and not the Canadians that did it. The Japanese were behind us in satellite technology, but the Japanese tend to be the best second. They've got very good people in the bureaucratic, the corporate, the political level, that are technologically sophisticated. In Canada, we're technologically naive. They see the development, they see how it can be applied, and they boom right ahead. So they know that satellites are the way of communication in the future, and even though they don't have any satellites in the sky, they're going to produce the satellite receivers for people like you and me and others around the world.
You'll order one for me too, will you?
Sure. We'll be
Okay.
paying to the Japanese like we do for everything because we don't capitalize on our own technology. It's the story of our country.
Yeah. Now, next thing, how big will this satellite be?
Well, the dishes for 6.4 will be 2 to 3 meters. For 1412 will be 1 meter, and for 3020, when it gets going, will be the size of a garbage can lid. Something that you can conveniently stick in your attic.
But
so
to
that,
get 6'4" American, 1412 Canadian, and 3020, which is what?
about so big. For 3020, a little bit bigger than a dinner plate.
You're telling me that a thing the size of a dinner plate, I can get all 3 satellites?
No, only the ones that operate at the higher frequency. You see, you've got to have a dish that matches the frequency of the satellite. Now, the one everybody wants today is the 6.4 because that's where the Americans...
That's the big boy.
That's the big one.
That's a 9-footer.
That's right. And what's coming in the future from the United States, by the way, on Canadian satellites, will be the 3-footer, the 1 meter dish.
The 1 meter dish.
And what will be coming in the future, because armies will want to have this in the field, so you've got to have the soldier able to carry the little satellite receiver on his back. That'll be the 3020, which will be this size, something that you can take around with you.
Does Fox know this?
No. People working for him know it, but he doesn't know
He
it.
doesn't know it.
No.
Well, eventually what they will do at once is prevent the importation of these smaller, cheaper satellite dishes from Japan to Canada, won't they?
They could try, but you see, the electronics, I'll be able to put in my pocket. The dish, I can make with a piece of plywood. You see, we've sent over 1,000 plans to people in British Columbia and all over the world. The part that actually picks up the signal, you can make and incorporate it into the side of a barn. You can paint a design on the side of a barn that will actually pick up the signal. The electronics are the secret of it. I can carry it around in my fist. So you're not going to be able to keep that out of the way.
When we have our little dishes, we'll have a tiny electronic thing, and we can tune in any satellite.
That's right.
No kidding.
That's right. Well, you know what's going
Who
on with
wants
the
to
federal
buy
government.
pay TV?
With the federal government today, the customs people up on the Yukon-Alaska border, they've got one of these great big dishes, and they got it to tune into CanCom. So what's the first thing they do? They kick it around so it brings in the American satellite, and then as good neighbors, they send the signal down to their U.S. customs counterparts on the American side, and now Fox is after his own government because they're telling the people at the customs office up there at the Yukon-BC border to quit picking up American signals. So they got trouble within their own government.
You're telling me, I like to get these things. At the BC Yukon border and the customs station, they've got an ANIC reception satellite, which they have twisted round to take the American signals, and they're feeding it to their buddies on the other side of the checkpoint.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Is Fox going to charge them?
Well, they told them to shut it down, same as they tell the hotels. You know, these receiving stations are on Indian reservations. We've got them in our highways camps. So all I'm saying is that the policy of the federal government is madness. And if people can pick these signals up, and if the materials with which to receive the signals are a little more complicated than rabbit ears,
You paint a terrifying picture for the networks in Canada and the United States, don't you?
well, the American networks are terrified. The CBC needn't be terrified. They're always going to be subsidized by the federal government. CTV, I don't know. But I can say about CTV, it used to be on the ANIC satellite, and a measure of how well appreciated this network is comes in the number of complaints I have that it has gone off satellite and now cannot be received in many remote communities in British Columbia that would like very much to have CTV. That would be their first preference. They can't get it, so they go to cable network news in Atlanta, Georgia, and the other things that come on American satellite But that's just bad policy.
Okay.
It's not bad technology in Canada.
I haven't harried you on the government things, but you are, I know, yourself gearing up for a spring election. If you don't have it in the spring with this little boom coming, you're dead. Besides, you're not running again anyway. I'd forgotten to check with you there. You finished this election.
No, I said I was running again,
Have you
Jack,
changed your mind again?
Well, you know what I'm like about this sort of thing. In any event, I hope that the people of British Columbia will recognize the virtues of free energy, but I don't want to
No, I don't want that either. It's all garbage. You know it, and I know it. After the break, calls to Dr. McGeer. Before we get down to cases, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of calls about interferon, I was very tempted to do that Brzezinski from Houston or somewhere, but my conscience wouldn't let me. I suspect I've been brainwashed by the medical profession.
Oh,
or did I make the right judgment?
You made the right judgment. I watched the program the CBC did, and I just squirmed with embarrassment that the public would be exposed, on the one hand, to a charlatan from the United States, and on the other hand, to two of Canada's very respected and responsible physicians. It's a difficult thing to say, look, we don't have a cure for your disease. That's the toughest thing a physician has to say. But nevertheless, only by upholding the truth do you prevent charlatans from exploiting.
Well, I'll tell you why I didn't put Brzezinski on. And this may be naive interpretation, although I've been around a long time. I realize that medical research is all in bits and pieces, that there is enmity and jealousy and fighting over funds throughout the world, correct?
Oh, yes.
I mean, a bunch of cats. The medical politics are extremely catty. But I am convinced that Burroughs Wellcome or Merck and Company or any of the big drug companies, if they could be given an identifiable substance which cured cancer, would say, Dr. McGeer, here's $50 billion, we'll take it, go away, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
Now, would they?
No, sure.
Maybe
Any company would, because we have set up a system which invites them to do that. You know, the way the drug aspect, the treatment aspect is organized relative to the way care is organized is utterly ridiculous. The government pays out huge amounts of money for basic research. No return from that. The government pays out huge amounts of money for hospitalization and to buy drugs. No return from that. The government refuses to get into any kind of an arrangement for the development and testing of new drugs. Well, that's to be done by the drug companies. On the other hand, what the government does is to set up enormously high hurdles for those companies to leap over in order to get their drugs approved. The consequence is that you have long delays, drugs that do not show opportunities for very high profits, even though they might be extremely effective treatments, never get on the market. In recognition of this, now the United States has brought in legislation for so-called orphan drugs. And this is to rescue effective agents that are taken off the market.
Because there's no money in them.
That's it.
So therefore, maybe I'm wrong in trusting these money-grubbing drug companies.
Well, you've got to recognize that governments themselves have set up a system that inhibits
But
it inhibits new drugs coming on the
you
market.
will agree with my basic premise. If I were a researcher and I came up with some neoplastons or whatever you call the things, which had a dramatic effect on the treatment of cancer, I would have no problem of having it verified, checked, and tested, would I?
None.
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 Are you prepared to do that kind of thing in your research here? Are you prepared to test other cancer possibilities?
Sure, that's always being done. And I might add that Canada has developed one of the most responsible and disciplined systems in the world for testing cancer drugs.
Okay.
Now, the problem, of course, is that that system is not set up to finance by itself the testing of new drugs. Somebody else has to pay for that, and that's what's inhibited the development of interferon research in Canada.
Okay.
And it's a tragedy.
We're going to get calls on that, no doubt about it. But in the meantime, you were telling me that in Japan, there are a number of other new developments. Just summarize them briefly and brightly, please.
We're going to see coming from Japan very soon voice-activated word processors. In other words, the secretary talks to the machine to get it going.
And the machine spells, I hope.
Sure. Never make a spelling mistake because it's in its memory. There will be computers attached to voice-activated systems so that I will talk into the machine in English and it will talk Japanese or Scotch, and you would speak into the machine in Scotch and it would talk English to me, so that there'll be these interpretive computers. They'll be on the market before too long. I saw a prototype of a mechanical seeing eye dog where the blind person walks behind and carries a little sensor so the machine always keeps ahead, but if there's an obstruction it stops, and it stops the person. And you can program it to go where it ought to go, supermarket, the bank, and so on, and it will have built into its memory the way to the bank, and will be able to sense as it goes along its particular position. We're going to have, coming from Japan, a handheld movie camera, so that when you go to your safari in Africa, you won't carry a great big huge movie camera with all kinds of film. You'll just have a little handheld device, and instead of being recorded on film, it'll be recorded on magnetic tape, the way reporters record voice on magnetic tape. And then when you get back, you'll just have a series of little tapes, which you'll now play into your television set. So for the average person, the day of the home movie camera will be gone. There are going to be new telecommunications devices based on the revolutionary fiber optic technology of Sumitomo. They call it Optopia. That's just around the corner. So what we have emerging from Japan is a stunning, dazzling array of new high technology products. The message for Canadians is, say, the raw material content of these intelligence devices is very, very small. Therefore, our raw material exports are not going to go very far towards their purchase. It all stems back to policy which was established 20 years ago in Japan and in Canada. Without resources, Japan said, we're going to go for high technology. Bud Drury, who was then Minister of Science for Canada, said, Canadians, he actually said this in the House of Commons, Canadians can get all the science they need by reading scientific journals. Prime Minister Trudeau said to me, technology was an option for Canada to pursue. So what's the state today? The state today is politicians, like myself, are flocking to Japan. What's the secret of your success? Who comes to Canada for economic advice? Nobody. All we are is at the bottom of the heap of OECD countries in economic development. But I do say this, Jack. Japan has done nothing that Canadians could not do. And any day at all, Canadians want to get seriously into the high technology game and take on Japan, the United States, or any other country, we can do it.
I would probably say that Canada faces a future of unemployed techno-peasants. Hopefully not. Calls to Dr. McGeer. Go ahead to Dr. Pat McGeer.
Yes. Good morning, Jack. Good morning, Dr. McGeer.
Got feedback on that line.
Oh, sorry.
That's better. Thank you. It wasn't your fault. Go ahead, please.
Okay. Dr. McGeer, first of all, I must say I'm very impressed in what you've had to say. You should be head of a large corporation in private business, and then I'd like to see where you get the money from to invest in risk projects such as interferon or into the satellite dishes and the research we've done in this program. You know, I don't understand it. You're Minister of Communications. We should be cooperating with TV stations, allowing them the 105 channels that we have, but no. We go out and buy satellites and go to a large expense to get channels that we could negotiate with our American friends and bring these channels in. I watch very few Canadian programs, Jack Webster being one and the morning news. It upsets me, Dr. McGeer, when I look at the amount of money and research that went into the propane conversion, and then I find out with a few telephone calls that there's a 1.5%, a 1.5 cent exempt tax, there's a 6.28 highway tax that's not on propane, and a 9% exempt tax on propane because it's not a combustion use. And the grants that are given to businessmen to convert to propane, and it just amazes me when you total these things out, these poor people that have converted to propane for $1,500 will be facing a tax and a higher cost of fuel when you add these taxes on. I don't understand it.
Can you tackle that, Dr. McGeer?
Well, it's a little hard to sort out the grievances all at once, but I can give people, first of all, the strategy for using methane in automobiles. You use methane because it's a Canadian fuel that we have in tremendous abundance. And because of that, if we use methane, we can become energy self-sufficient because our automobiles will not be using Arab oil, and we'll stop wasting from $4 to $10 billion a year buying a fuel that is really just an inferior alternative to our own native British Columbia and Canadian fuel. Propane is in a different category. Propane is a minor byproduct of a gas field, about 2%, and a minor product of a refinery run on Arab oil of about 7%. The oil companies are very keen to sell that propane. That's why they've been pushing it so hard. We have not been against propane, but what we have warned the Canadian people is that if everybody were to convert to propane, there wouldn't be enough to go around. Methane is our big fuel, and methane is what we should be concentrating on for
Is
energy.
methane free? Carry on, caller.
I'm sorry, Dr. McGeer, you went to Washington and addressed the Senate, and they were very impressed. Why didn't we know about this? All I'm saying is if everyone in BC converted to propane or to methane or to any other gases other than gasoline, where would we receive our revenue from for our highway tax? And when you add this on, the fuel that you're suggesting we use in substitution to gasoline would be more expensive than gasoline.
Good point.
Well, the price of gasoline is basically going to be determined by Sheikh Yemeni and the Arabs, and he's going to charge as much as he possibly can. The price of natural gas in Canada should be the cost of producing that fuel. Now, what's happened with natural gas is that everybody has used natural gas as a means of raising revenue in order to coattail on what Sheikh Yemeni and the OPEC nations have done. For example, we pay in British Columbia, I think it's $1.20 a thousand cubic feet or per therm to the federal government as a methane tax, a natural gas tax. It's robbery of the Canadian people or the British Columbia people because we're the ones that are the producers of methane. On the other hand, the federal government subsidizes the purchase of Sheikh Yemeni's oil by about $20 a barrel. So he's taxing our Canadian fuel in order to subsidize the purchase of the Arab fuel.
That's federal government policy. I'm talking about our policy. I'm talking about
our policy
and not informing the public that there's no highway tax on this propane use at this time. And when it's added on, they're going to be facing a larger cost.
Is that right?
The whole purpose in removing the tax on methane is to encourage people to make the conversion. You see, there's an initial threshold that you and I have to go through to be able to use our Canadian fuel. We've got to correct the factory defect in our automobiles.
But you're
Because-
not aiming
because
at you're not aiming at propane anyway. Your object is methane.
That's correct.
Now I've got to leave that there. Answer this question on why couldn't we have negotiated the 105 channels instead of being stuck for 50, 60, 150, $300 for pay TV?
Our big problem is federal government regulation. You know, our policy in British Columbia is open skies. If we were saying what should be done, we'd say, God bless you to all of the people who are broadcasting, and please enjoy it to all the people who are receiving.
Next call. Go ahead, please.
Yeah,
That's you. Go ahead.
Jack?
Yes?
Mr. McGeer, I have a satellite dish. I'm calling from Edwards, Illinois, so BCTV is still on the satellite. And I know CanCom has been scrambling their signals, and I've managed to build a decoder for it.
Good for you.
And I'm also in the process of building a 12-14 gigahertz down converter so I can pick up NXC when it goes on the air February 1st, and a decoder for that.
Good for you.
Living here in the States and watching a lot of Canadian television, primarily because I'm a hockey fan, but I also like to watch Jack here and his show.
Jack.
I find really kind of the Canadian government's attitude towards communications rather naive and stupid. They won't allow me to purchase their signals here, although the American government has no qualms about me doing so, so I have to go out and steal them, which I'd rather not do. And I have the same problem with a lot of American satellite distributors, too.
Now, just stop there for a moment. You've called me 2 or 3 times from Edwards, Illinois.
Right.
How far is that from Chicago, the only place I know in Illinois?
It's about 160 miles.
What's your name?
Mike McBride.
What's your phone number, Mike?
My phone number is area code 309
Uh-huh.
673
Uh-huh.
0410.
I'll tell you why, because if and when I have Francis Fox on, I must call you and tell him about the freedom there is between here and there, but not really between there and here.
Uh-huh.
Mike, that's good, and we'll give you honorary Canadian citizenship, although our immigration system is so full of rackets. If you can just get the right forged documents, I can get it for you tomorrow.
Oh,
How's that, Mike?
that sounds like a winner.
How old are you, Mike? How old are you? How old are you?
Me, I'm 39.
What do you do for a living?
I'm a hired killer. I'm in pest control business.
You're a hired killer, a hit man against pests.
Right, it gets some bugs anyway.
Oh, good. Mike, I gotta go, and thanks for your call, and do keep watching my sole listener in Illinois. Watch it.
I will, as long as you stay on the satellite.
Well, you're seeing this now from CanCom.
Well, I gotta get
Sure.
the permission from them first.
No, you don't need to get permission. That signal is on your property, and you're not stealing anything that was put on your property uninvited.
Well,
Tell
I
him that.
I agree there, but I still would like to be able to do it legally.
No.
You're doing it legally.
You're-
Let anybody tell you the law that you're breaking by picking up an electronic signal that was put on your property uninvited. And if they say you're stealing, then tell them to take it away from your property because it's a nuisance. You're not breaking any law. The only people that would try and tell you you're breaking a law are people who are the vested interests or people in bureaucracy who are trying to twist a law passed by Parliament that didn't have that in mind at all.
Mike, thank you very much. How's the weather in Illinois?
Oh, it's about 45 degrees here today. It's beautiful. We haven't had any winter yet.
Neither have we.
Well, you never do. I'm from Seattle originally.
Oh, I see. That's why you have an interest in the Northwest. Thank you, Mike.
Yeah, bye.
Bye. What do you say, over and out or something quaint? Take a break. Next call. See, an American Webster. LD2. Go ahead to Webster.
Mr. Webster,
Yes.
ask the doctor, if you would, please, is the Japanese going to target the United States for these satellite receivers? If so, I'd like to know if we were going to be able to get them down here.
He's asking if the Japanese are going to target the United States as the market.
You bet your life.
The answer is yes. Okay, give
You
us...
bet your life.
And Canada, of course, too.
Sure, but we're considered in Canada, as far as Japanese sellers are concerned, as a kind of minor edition of the American market. They go after that one. And you bet your life, caller, that's exactly what they have in mind.
How long before they're in the stores? Give me an educated guess.
Well, the Japanese never say they're going to do something until they've done it. And they were a little cagey with me, but they did put it on their show, and I would guess 6 months to a year.
Thank you from Seattle. You watch me on cable, do you?
Yes, I'm under an impression down here that the FCC is fighting this, that we might not be able to get them because, you know, the cable outfits are hand in hand with the FCC down here. And I think
Same
they're
in
going to kind
Canada.
of hold them out in this country, so we won't be able to get them.
Well, anyway, you keep watching Webster, and Dr. McGeer will tell us when they land in the country, won't you, Doctor?
Look,
And thank you, Jack.
Thank you.
vested interests always try and prevent new technology. But it's like King Canute trying to tell the waves to cease. It's not going to happen.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, good morning, Dr. McGeer.
Morning.
I just make two short comments and then I'll hang up and listen to Dr. McGeer respond. Firstly, I'm concerned with the emigration of high technology people from Canada. I have a friend that just graduated from UBC in September with a doctorate degree in robot computerization, and he's gone to Germany to work for Volkswagen. That's the first thing that really concerns me.
Okay.
Second one is a compliment to you about when you were the Minister of Education. We didn't appreciate having a rational and informed person at the helm, and that's something we dearly lack there now.
Thank you, sir. This man thinks that Van der Zam is a disaster. What do you think of Van der Zam, your cabinet colleague, who once called all of you gutless?
Well, he's taken on a difficult job, and frankly, I think he's doing it extremely well.
Oh, you support everything he's done?
Well, he certainly pushed the button on people that are trying to man the schools like they were shipyards during the war. Here we've had for all these years a shrinking school population, but more and more teachers.
Look.
And that costs the taxpayers a lot of money.
My complaint about Willie, and I've told him to his face, is that he doesn't come with a proper background. There is one fact I would like to know about educational costs. At the moment, we're told 60% goes in teachers' salaries.
No, it's closer to 80.
Okay, that's even worse. 80% teachers' salaries, ipso facto, 20% to all other administration.
That's right.
I would like to see the cost in percentage of classroom salaries to teachers, classroom salaries, and the balance bulked together as administration and maintenance. Now, I bet you would come out 55 administration and maintenance, 45 classroom teachers' salaries.
I tell you what.
Could you get that figure for me?
Yes, I can.
No, you can't.
No, I can, and, well, maybe I'm promising too much. We can make an estimate about it. Do you know, here's something I learned in Japan, which is really rather striking. Administrators in Japan are paid less in their national laboratories than the scientists. And one of the directors was actually the National Mechanical Engineering Laboratory in Japan, was boasting about how much he was getting the administrative cost down. And really, they had pared it right down to a minimum. And then he complained that his own salary was less than that of the scientists who worked for him. But it becomes very simple to figure out why it's so easy to reduce administration. All you do is pay the administrators less. And then all of the fat disappears. You see, there's an incentive in our system, particularly the school system, to have more and more administrators because you pay them more. If you pay the administrators less, then they'd all want to be in the classroom teaching.
The point is, our scientists, quote, teachers, have become administrators, quote, clerks. And they're the 80, 90, 75, 50, 60,000 a year, man.
Yeah,
and you didn't improve that mess.
Absolutely not, because we don't control from Victoria the way the administrative setup in each school district goes. That's something that's done by local school boards. So you either give local school boards autonomy or you don't. Now, by the time I left, Jack, and I'll say this quite in the open, I began to wonder very much whether we should have administration done by individual school boards. They don't have any in Australia at all, and I can tell you the system works very well. But the thing I liked best was what I saw in Japan, where they paid the administrators less than the people who are actually doing the work. And boy, I tell you, that gets administrative costs down because nobody wants to be an administrator.
I'm running out of time, but in the United States, they have a federal law that no deputy minister can get more than his boss. Now, that would be another good trimming of the fat, wouldn't it? Because all your deputy ministers get more than you do.
Well, but then there are people who are assistant superintendents in the school system, assistant superintendents who get more than the premier.
75,000.
So
enough, Patrick, we could go on forever. I'm sorry I'm booked up this morning with other important material. I'll see you on the hustings around about March or April. My thanks to Pat McGeer after the break. Not for me to exploit controversy, but I was fascinated in Martin's book about presidents and prime ministers about this particular incident involving a physical attack, you might say, on Prime Minister Pearson by Lyndon Johnson. So just to get things in focus, let's look at that little clip first, originally from the ambassador. You do me a favor, Ambassador.
Yeah.
I want you to check a story for me.
Yes?
He tells a hysterically funny story now.
It's the Pearson one.
This is the Pearson and Johnston, where he says that Charles Ritchie watched Johnson lose his temper and pick Pearson up by the shoulders, just like a beagle.
I don't know, but I'm going to find out. It's Edgar Ritchie.
Oh, it's not Charles.
Edgar, I believe it's Edgar. I know Edgar, so I'm going to check with him. I'll check it. I'll let you know.
Would you? I'd really like to know.
I can't imagine, even though Johnson wasn't anything smooth, I think it would be a terrible rudeness to have done that, and I question it.
And as true as his word, the ambassador investigated the matter and sent me a missive, a communication, giving his side of the story. And I'm going to read that letter to you now. I have investigated Lawrence Martin's allegations about President Johnston and Prime Minister Pearson and found them to be false. He states, having pinned a much smaller Pearson against the railing, the President of the United States grabbed him by the shirt collar, twisted it, and lifted the shaken Prime Minister by the neck. Martin further states that Johnson battered Pearson for speaking out against Vietnam. I, says Mr. Robinson, talked to Ambassador Charles Ritchie and Ambassador A. Edgar Ritchie to inquire as to the accuracy of these statements. It was necessary to call both Ambassadors Ritchie because Martin confuses them in his book just as he is confused on many other subjects. Ambassador Charles Ritchie, who was present on this occasion, told me that he never saw or heard that Johnson picked up or grabbed Pearson by the shirt or lifted him by the neck. It would be more correct to say that Johnson grasped Pearson's lapel as a gesture of anger. A. Edgar Ritchie said that he had also never heard that Johnson had actually picked up Mr. Pearson by the shirt or neck, although the President's behavior had been such as to anger Canadians who heard about it at the time. Clearly, Martin, says the ambassador, Mr. Robinson, is seeking to undermine the traditional conception of U.S.-Canadian friendship by writing insulting falsehoods about the relationship between a president and a prime minister. He will not succeed. Paul H. Robinson, Jr. I'm going to read a little bit from your book, The Presidents and the Prime Ministers, which is really a most enjoyable book, but causing trouble between Canada and the United States, because you say that at the beginning of April 1965, after Pearson had denounced the bombing of North Vietnam, LBJ went off his nut. And when they were in wherever they were, suddenly Johnson's outside with Pearson, and Pearson is shouting, horse manure, what's that effect? Then pins Pearson against the railing, and Lyndon Johnson picks Pearson, grabs him by the shirt collar, twists it, and lifts him, and then shouts, you've fouled my rug. A really humiliating attack on the Prime Minister of Canada. Now, is that true?
Yes, it is.
How do you know it's true?
Well, I know it's true from eyewitness accounts of people who were there.
Uh-huh. And what was the occasion actually? Was it normal for Johnson to lose his temper if anybody crossed him at any time?
Well, Johnson was a very physical man in the extent that he was always sort of putting his arms around people and urging them to do this and that, and he could be angry at people to the extent where that he might grab them by the lapels. However, I don't think you would see him doing that to other leaders. Like I don't think you'd see him do that to somebody like Charles de Gaulle back then. But with the Canadian Prime Minister, I thought that I think he felt that, well, I can treat this man this way.
All right, let me get to the next section. Recently, I interviewed Paul H. Robinson, Jr., the U.S. ambassador to Ottawa, and he says, in effect, that you're a liar, that he's investigated these allegations and found them to be false, and that you are trying to undermine the traditional conception of U.S.-Canadian friendship by writing insulting falsehoods. What do you say to that?
That's very interesting. What are some of what's some of his information that suggests to him that my information is false?
All right, here it is here. He writes to me, black and white, that he talked to both Ambassadors Ritchie, Charles and A. Edgar, right? He said he had to talk to both because you confused them in your book, just as you're confused on many other subjects. Do you confuse them in the book?
There's one instance in the book where this is not anything to do with Lyndon Johnson. This is to do with Dean Rusk. And Dean Rusk told me that he had given Ed Ritchie hell once over some matter. And in fact, I learned now, Ed Ritchie now tells me that it was Charles Ritchie who he had given hell to.
Just to get to that point, Robinson, the big ambassador, says Ambassador Charles Ritchie, who was present on that occasion, told Robinson that he never saw or heard that Johnston picked up or grabbed Pearson by the shirt or lifted him by the neck. But Ritchie does say that Johnston grasped Pearson's lapel as a gesture of anger.
Right, well, let's make sure we got Ambassador Ritchie right here. In a magazine article in Maclean's in 1974, which led me to follow up on this story, Ambassador Ritchie wrote at that point that the scene, I'm quoting him almost directly here, the scene was approaching one of physical violence. The President of the United States strode over and seized the Prime Minister of Canada by the lapels.
Seized him by the lapel.
So I had read that, and I wanted to follow up on this story, of course, because it was very interesting. And I went to Ottawa, and I interviewed Ambassador Ritchie and to get more details on the story. And Ambassador Ritchie told me at this point a little bit more about it. He said, this time he said it was a shirt collar as opposed to the lapels, and that he lifted the Prime Minister of Canada by the shirt collar as he was upbraiding him with this foul and disgusting language which he had used for an hour. So he was actually lifting him up when he was giving him hell. Picking him up by the scruff of the neck was, I believe, one of the phrases that Ambassador Ritchie told me. Now, the bottom line here, whose ever embellishments you believe, is that the President of the United States felt that he could treat a Canadian Prime Minister in such a way that he could go over and seize him or grab him by the lapels or by the shirt collars. It doesn't really matter, does it? The fact of the matter is that he grabbed the Canadian Prime Minister by the lapels, by the shirt collar, whatever, and treated him like he was some satellite head of state or something.
Treated him like he was a beagle dog, perhaps.
Well, yeah, if you want to use those terms.
Now,
I'm not worried about the details so much, whether he actually lifted him a little bit by the shirt collar as he was going into this disgusting diatribe or not. The fact of the matter is that he treated him in that type of way.
Okay, there's one little piece I should tell you in Robinson's letter from A. Edgar Ritchie. Right. He said, and A. Edgar Ritchie confirmed to Robinson that the President's behavior had been such as to anger Canadians. We didn't hear an awful lot about it at the time, did we?
No, there was a great media cover-up at the time. The President and the Prime Minister proceeded to a press conference after this episode, and And Johnson, he was bristling a little bit, but not enough for the press to catch on. Johnson came out and said that, oh, we had a fine lunch and a fine talk. And then Pearson got up and followed up and said, oh, it was a wonderful time. And the media went away and duly recorded their statements to that effect.
Now, in all of your book, is this the most humiliating thing ever done to a Canadian Prime Minister by an American president?
This appears to be the only occasion in which a President of the United States actually physically maltreated a Canadian Prime Minister. There's been many occasions on which there has been vocal abuse.
For instance, did Johnson hate Pearson as much as Kennedy hated Diefenbaker and vice versa?
No, I don't think so. I think Kennedy's hatred for Diefenbaker superseded that of Johnson to Pearson, and that maybe had Kennedy had the opportunity, he would have wanted to swat the old chief as well.
Yeah. Anyway, what do you say to Paul Robinson, the U.S. ambassador, who accuses you of writing insulting falsehoods?
Well, you know, the ambassador to Canada is entitled to his views, no matter how misguided they are.
Thank you very much, Lawrence Martin, presidents and prime ministers. My thanks to both sides of the controversy. One thing that can be stated with accuracy and clarity and lack of disagreement is that Johnson did not lift him by the back of the neck or by the ears, nor did he shake him like a beagle. Next, we're going to go to Whistler, see what the devil's happening up there after the break. Well, I've got John Johnston, the Deputy Minister of Lands, Parks and Housing, to explain to me what's been done at Whistler. Have you bailed out the municipality of Whistler with public money, John?
No, we haven't, Jack. What we've done is we've purchased the shares of the company, and I've been directed that there would be no subsidies or direct government expenditures on projects at Whistler. And so we don't see it as a bailout, which would be, you know, the direct expenditures by government that were non-recoverable.
Now, explain first of all, this Whistler Land Company was a satellite of the Whistler municipality.
Yes, that's right.
Now, you've set up a new Crown corporation called Whistler Land Company Developments Limited. Is that a Crown corporation?
Yes, it's a Crown corporation.
And what are you going to do with that? Are you not going to lift the burden off the back of the land company?
Yes, we are. We take over the shares, and ultimately we will be taking over, we will take the assets and liabilities and obligations of the land company.
And are you going to run the land company?
Yes, we are. We will be putting our own management in there to manage this company into good health.
But it's got millions in bank debt, hasn't it? $6.5 million.
$6.5 million in bank debts, a total of $19 million worth of liabilities on the balance sheet.
Who's going to pay the interest on the bank debt?
Well, we hope that by managing the company in a prudent fashion and in discussions with the bank that we'll manage it out and end up with a profit.
And the provincial government will guarantee any loans you need to pay interest to run the company?
No, we haven't committed to that at all. We're having meetings with the banks next week.
So you're going to run this Whistler Land Corporation because it was badly run by the Whistler municipality?
I think there are other factors. They had some management problems, but they also had a very ambitious project, which they managed to get a great deal of it done. And it hit upon bad times, like many other ambitious projects.
Yeah.
And combined with other factors, they got into a bit of trouble.
If you hadn't stepped in, John Johnston, speaking on behalf of Land, Parks and Housing, would Whistler municipality have gone bankrupt?
It would certainly have caused the municipality some very significant problems because the land company owes them $2.1 million, which would have put a serious financial drain on the municipality.
Hold on, John, will you? Because I'm going to have a word with Mark, and you'll be able to hear it on the line, Mark Angus, and perhaps there might be something that one of us wants to know. Mr. Angus, good morning.
Good morning, Jack.
You're president of the Whistler Land Developments Limited, aren't you?
I'm chairman of the board of the Whistler Village Land Company. Yes, I am.
And are you happy with what was done, and would you have gone bankrupt if the government hadn't come to your rescue?
You're talking of the land company or the municipality?
Both.
Pardon me?
Both.
Both?
Both, yeah.
Well, the municipality would not have gone bankrupt. They're rather quite solvent. The and I don't believe the land company would have gone bankrupt. We could have tried to work out something with the banks to restructure our debt. I'm quite happy with what the government has done, of course. Makes it much easier for the council and the staff of the municipality to deal straight with a corporation that they really aren't tied to in any way.
So what this does for you really is helps private developers up there in restoring confidence so you can carry on with your grand master plan for your international year-round resort. Is that right?
Well, I wouldn't say, I don't think we're helping the private investor at all. This is going to be a Crown corporation. The Crown has made a very good business move. They're going to make a profit from this, Jack, and that comes back into the probably the general fund of the province.
But Mark, why can they look forward to a good profit when you had to go pleading to them for a bailout?
Well, Jack, I think they can probably carry the debt right now. So
in other words, their better credit makes it easier for them.
That's right, Jack.
Okay, my thanks to both Mark Angus, the municipality, and what's your part in the new Crown Corporation, Mark?
I believe I'll be sitting on the board. And by the by, Jack, have you ever been to Whistler?
Not for 20 years. It's so difficult to get there.
No, it's very easy. The road's very good. They've done a very nice job on that, and I expect to see you up here very soon.
Oh, dear. It's a long, miserable drive in the rain.
Well, but that's all potential snow, Jack.
Okay, okay. I hate snow, but I'll make the effort to get there and do a piece in Whistler.
You bet.
Things are pretty bad, I gather, in Whistler.
Things are wonderful up here.
Oh, come off it.
What's wrong?
All my restaurant friends downtown are moaning the blues.
What's that like?
About the Whistler things.
What about?
No biz.
No business?
Oh.
Lots of business. We had record-breaking days over Christmas.
Okay, I'll have to come and see you. My thanks both to you, Mark, and to Johnny Johnston. Much obliged. Thanks
okay,
again.
Thanks
Bye. I'll be back after the break. The other day when I had Willie Vanderzam on the air about education, I learned to my semi-literate astonishment that Shakespeare is censored in the schools because of his bawdy approach to certain aspects of everyday life. Debbie Vandergracht of the News did this piece for me.
Jack, you had a caller to the show yesterday morning who's convinced that the BC government is practicing censorship when it comes to Shakespeare in the high schools. And that woman was Suzanne Gerard, and I decided to come and talk to her to find out why she thinks that. How did you reach that conclusion?
My son came home with one of his English books, and he said, "Mom, there's something wrong with this book." And I read it, and he read it, and then we got my original Shakespeare, and we looked at it, and here they depleted a whole section out of it.
The government has chosen a cut version of the bard's famous tragedy, Macbeth, and thereby hangs our tale. The section that's deleted would make good discussion in what we used to call guidance class. It can be found in Act 2, Scene 3 of the play, in a discussion between a minor character called the Porter and Macduff. And it has to do with the various effects of intoxicants on human encounters of the obvious kind. In it, the Porter says, "Drink, sir, is a great provoker. Lechery, sir. It provokes the desire, but it takes away the performance. It persuades him and disheartens him, makes him stand to and not stand to."
When you start something like this, you're treading on really dangerous ground. When you start censoring things, that one person says, "This is what you're going to read, because I say so." No, that is not a democracy.
But in a sense, it is laundered Shakespeare.
Yes, it is, I suppose. And this has always happened. I suppose it's only as important as you want to make it. Some people will object to the fact that some of these lines aren't taken out, and someone will object to the fact that they aren't there. You can't win either way. You just have to make the best selection you can and hope that this will be suitable to a majority of people.
There was a book written about Shakespeare's body, and I think we can get carried away. I really do. Sure, he wrote bawdy jokes because the people of his time liked them, and so he filled his theaters. After all, he was a successful playwright. But I think, again, we can get carried away on that and feel that this is the essential Shakespeare, and it isn't.
Debbie Vandergracht is with me now. Debbie, one thing I've forgotten, maybe I didn't know. What grades do they read Shakespeare in?
10, 11, and 12. And they study an average of 3 plays.
Now, it's not that long since you went to high school compared to me, right?
Uh-huh, that's for sure.
Have you any memories of feeling that Shakespeare was censored then?
Not when I studied it. We had the Signet version, which was used right up until last year in the BC high schools. And that was the complete text.
Now, actually, do you think the mother had a legitimate complaint? Or do you think that in grades 10, 11, and 12, they shouldn't talk about these kind of natural events, you might call them? What do you think?
Well, this is just my own personal opinion, but I think if you're going to study Shakespeare, you should study Shakespeare in its entirety.
Wonder if the same happens with other classics like Chaucer and whatnot.
I think it does, and Vic Wright, the teacher who we saw in the story, was saying that Chaucer is bawdy as well, but you don't read them for the bawdiness. But the teachers that I talked to seemed to think that it wasn't that big a deal that this passage was left out and whatever other passages were left out.
I suppose if it at least gives the youngsters a solid introduction to Shakespeare in 10, 11, and 12, it does a hell of a lot better than nothing.
Well, that's right, and their point in getting this particular edition that they're using now was because it's easy for kids to study. I mean, kids don't really like Shakespeare. They can't even understand him to begin with, right? 14th century to the 20th century, that's quite a generation gap. And this particular edition has Cole's notes right on the side, and that's why they chose it. But, you know, I remember when Cole's notes were illegal.
I don't even know what Cole's notes are.
Oh, Jack, that shows a generation gap between us, but they're just a simplified version.
Of the whole thing.
That's right.
That's the kind of thing I do when I'm preparing a story.
That's
anyway,
right.
Thank you very much, Ms.
You're
van der Gracht,
welcome.
and I trust you will give me the odd little special from your news hour duties to help brighten up the Webster show.
Whatever you'd like, Jack.
My thanks to Debbie van der Gracht. I'll be back after the break. Two items on the program for Monday already. One is Michael Wilson, Tory finance critic. The other one is a follow-up on the expose of immigration rackets in the Auditor General's report when I had Ken Dye, the Auditor General of Canada, excuse me, on the air this week. And I'm going to highlight the specific problem of a family in Smithers, BC, who claimed to have been treated quite dreadfully due to complications of employment in Immigration Canada. That's Webster. Have a good weekend. Back Monday at 9 a.m. precisely.
The position that I took when I appeared on Jack Webster's program, and I must say I regret the circumstances of that appearance, it wasn't an interview, it was an inquisition, did not give me an opportunity to elaborate on the position of the party, and certainly I continue to support
Pat McGeer on interferon in BC. Midnight on Check.